One of the most unbelievable things I've ever seen in a Major League Baseball game happened on Wednesday when Mets pitcher Jorge Lopez absolutely lost it in a game between the Mets and the Dodgers. Things weren't going well for the Mets, which is pretty typical for the Mets this season, let's be honest. New York stands at 11 games below 500 as I record this video on Thursday morning. Jorge Lopez was into the game. I believe this was the 8th inning, and the Mets were just getting shellacked. The Dodgers ended up scoring 6 runs in the 8th. They win the game over the Mets 10-3. Jorge Lopez doesn't have a great outing. He only records 1 out. He gives up a couple of hits, gives up a walk. Ultimately, he was charged with 2 earned runs. And when he goes to be taken out of the game mid-inning, he throws his glove into the crowd. Throws his glove, yeets it over the netting into the crowd. One fan had to be pretty happy to get a glove from Jorge Lopez. Really, any Major League player, you're going to be pumped up to get that souvenir. But he was just upset. And if it had ended there, well, he might still be on the Mets, honestly. I don't know 100% sure if that would be the case, but he would have had a better chance than he ultimately did. And the news now, of course, is that Jose Lopez has been designated for assignment. It didn't take long for that to happen. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza was understandably livid, especially after he got wind of what Jorge Lopez said after the game. Here, this audio is courtesy of SNY.
Carlos Mendoza said that he understands the emotion, but that particular action of throwing your glove into the stands was unacceptable. Looking back on it, do you regret doing that?
No.
Okay. Jorge Lopez, do you regret throwing your glove into the stands? Your manager was pretty embarrassed by it. You regret that, bud? No, he says. And then, of course, he goes on.
I don't regret it. I think I've been looking the worst teammate probably in the whole MLB. So,
okay, Jorge Lopez, are you sure this is a good idea? Look, the Mets are probably the worst team in MLB, but do we really want to say it? You're on the team, pal. You're on the baseball club, at least for now. That's a clubhouse interview from Jorge Lopez. His last as a Met. I'll be curious to see if other teams are going to maybe take a flyer on this guy. We'll talk in a minute about how his stats are actually not too bad. But that is a brutal, brutal look. We'll play the rest of this audio, and then we'll go back because there was some discrepancy over whether he actually said what it sounded like he said. But let's finish this up.
Whatever happened. So whatever they want to do, I'll be tomorrow here if they want me, whatever they want to do. So I'm going to keep doing this thing, so I'm healthy on whatever, on whatever to do, I'm ready to come back tomorrow, and if they want me to be here, so I'll be here.
Jorge, I'm going to keep it 100 with you, my man. I do not think you'll be here. I don't think so. I think they're going to cut you, and that is what happened. DFA'd by the Mets, Jorge Lopez, whose numbers on the season actually not too shabby. And this is a veteran player who's been around the block, a former All-Star. As recently as 2022, finished the year with a 2.54 ERA, was very effective between Baltimore and Minnesota. Last year, not as much. Spent time with 3 different teams, Baltimore, Minnesota, and Miami as well. Finished with a 5.95 ERA. But this year, even after the blow-up yesterday, 3.76 ERA for Lopez in 26 1/3 innings. Only 19 strikeouts, so not a big power arm. 11 walks, maybe more than you'd like for your relief pitchers in terms of the walk rate, and has had 3 consecutive outings in which he's given up at least an earned run, 5 earned runs over his last 2 1/3. So, if you had isolated it to before the recent stretch that he's had here over the past week, really good numbers from Jorge Lopez this year. So I think I don't have any doubt that he's maybe got something left in the tank for some team out there, but this is not a good look. It's just being a bad teammate to respond that way, even though the Mets, and I said earlier the Mets are the worst team in baseball. They're obviously not. There are teams worse than the Mets, but it feels like the Mets do bad baseball more dramatically and more entertaining than anybody else over the course of time. This is another notch in that belt. And Jorge Lopez asked, do you regret your action? No, I don't. And then what he said about it sounds like I'm with the worst team in MLB. And because there's a bit of a language barrier perhaps with Lopez that doesn't sound super crisp and clear when he says it. So there was clarification requested by Mets field reporter for SNY, Steve Gelbs. Hope I'm saying that right. But he asked, this is his tweet. I asked Jorge Lopez if he regretted throwing his glove into the stands. Not only did he say no, he then called the Mets, quote, the worst team in the whole effing MLB. I later gave him, this is the key part here, I later gave him a chance to clarify, and he confirmed that that's what he meant. Right, so this comment from Lopez wasn't just, I'm the worst teammate in MLB, which there was some saying that that's what he was meaning by that. He wasn't calling the Mets out. He was calling out himself for being a bad teammate. But then he was asked later, and I saw basically where he said, yeah, it's both. It's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I've been a bad teammate, and I'm also on a bad team. So that was the report that came out about it Wednesday. There were multiple reporters who had said, I asked for clarification. He said he's on the worst effing team in MLB. We'll play it again for you to hear, and then we'll dive into the update on this because Jorge Lopez has chimed in on Instagram and shared, his intention with the comment.
Looking the worst team probably in the whole MLB.
So you get another chance to hear what he said there. Worst team, worst teammate. Again, it was clarified by the SNY reporter who said this is what he meant. But now we're hearing differently when it comes to Jorge Lopez's response. He chimed in on Instagram and said, whoever hear me, I said teammate. And what I said on the situation, I've been the worst teammate. And then he said, thanks, media, for making it worse. Now, the question is, was he actually cut for those comments, or was it more the actions on the field? Anthony DiComo, who covers the Mets as a beat writer for MLB.com, he tweeted out about an hour ago, shortly after Jorge Lopez chimed in on Instagram, I want to be clear about this. Jorge Lopez was not DFA'd because of any team/teammate confusion. He was DFA'd because he embarrassed the organization with his actions and words, throwing his glove into the stands, lying about meeting with management, and offering zero remorse. I tracked down the audio from another SNY tweet where the clarification happens, so you can hear for yourself Jorge Lopez being asked, hey, did you mean what it sounded like you said? And we'll debate whether this should have clarified the situation or not. Here is that clip, courtesy of SNY, of course.
Just to clarify what you said, just because I didn't fully understand, did you say I'm on the worst team? Is that what you had said?
Yeah, probably. It looked like.
And that they were embarrassed by you? Is that what you...
Yeah, they do.
Okay, so that's the moment. He says, to clarify, you said you were on the worst team. He said, probably. So he's not really taking the full responsibility for what he said there. And I get it. Language barrier. You're under the microscope. You're in front of a microphone. You're in front of a camera. And this is why I think a lot of times we do see foreign players, guys who have English as their second language, use an interpreter for these moments, because you could get into hot water if you think something is innocuous and then it's not. And I know if you are an English-born speaker, you're like, well, how is that even possible? It can't possibly be misconstrued. I'm telling you, I cover the Cardinals. I've covered baseball at the big league level for, 8 years now. It can happen. These little slip-ups, you hear about them from time to time. They can happen, and so you do feel bad. But at the same time, a lot of ways that Jorge Lopez could have saved himself the trouble here, and he didn't do so. So, look, this feels to me like I want to be sensitive to a language barrier and understand that Jorge Lopez may be getting run through the ringer on this a little bit more than he deserves if he didn't say, hey, the Mets are the worst effing team in MLB. But on the other side of that is, it's true that he acted out on the field, acted irresponsibly, embarrassed the organization. I bet Steve Cohen said right away, we're done with this guy. Look, he might be a decent pitcher, but we just don't have any time for this. And then he sort of doubled down and said he didn't regret it, right? He may not have said the Mets are the worst team in the whole effing MLB. He may have said he's the worst teammate. It also feels like it could be a little bit convenient at this point to have that narrative spun about you. You can turn yourself into the victim. Jorge Lopez was the perpetrator in this, right? Like, he didn't need to do what he did on the field. And I get it. Emotions get the best of you. But if that had happened an hour later when you're in the clubhouse, or 45 minutes later, whatever it ended up being, and reporters are at your locker stall, you say, I regretted it. I embarrassed the Mets. I embarrassed my organization. my teammates are out there trying to fight and claw and win, and I let the competition get the better of me. It was in the moment. I won't do it again, and I do apologize to anybody that I upset with my behavior. You say something like that, and I think all is well, because there is like a quotient of how good are you versus how egregious was the action you committed. And if you express remorse for something, your team is generally going to look to not give you away for nothing, right? They're generally going to be like, okay, this guy made a mistake, but if we like the guy, if he's a solid enough player, we're gonna look past this and take the little bit of a PR hit, and then this is all going to blow over. But when you have the post game that he had, and again, whether he's being misunderstood or misconstrued in any way is almost irrelevant. He was asked point blank, do you regret it? And he said no. So your ERA can be 5.76 or 3.76. And I just feel like that is the doubling down that cost Jorge Lopez. If he didn't say what a lot of people thought he said at first, you do feel bad for that. Sounded like he said, I've been on the worst team in probably the whole effing MLB, which record-wise, the Mets are pretty bad, but not that bad. But he's feeling it after 3 games in a row where he hasn't done his job. He's given up runs. He says, look, I said teammate. Does it really make that much of a difference? I think where he lost the plot is by doubling down and saying, I don't regret what I did. Whatever happened, happened. And I'm healthy. The players always go to, I'm healthy. That's what they go to sometimes when they feel like they're in a box and they're boxed in on their commentary. And I'll be here tomorrow. Well, he's not there tomorrow. Do I think that the language barrier maybe contributed some to this? Perhaps. But if you're asked if you regret it and you say no, that's a universal language. I think he could have done a better job there and might still be on the Mets as a result. Now, could another team pick him up? I could see it, man. Front offices can be all about second chances if they think it's going to give him a chance to win baseball games. So I don't think he should be blackballed necessarily for this incident, but it's not for me to decide. It's going to be for the other 29 teams to decide whether or not taking a flyer on a player who's had success in the past, has had some level of success this year, you get him a change of scenery. I could see this being a turnaround story where a former All-Star kind of regains his form in a better team environment. But you can bet, though, when that guy does walk into another clubhouse, the veterans in that clubhouse are going to have to kind of have a chat with him and say, look, man, we obviously all saw it. We're going to welcome you into this group, but you've also got to understand that kind of stuff won't work in our clubhouse, right? So let me know your thoughts on this, baseball fans, and make sure to hit the subscribe button, the red and white subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of this video screen if you enjoy baseball content all season long. Primarily, we're a Cardinals channel, but lots of MLB news and coverage as well throughout the year. So appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.